here on time.
Just so everyone knows, I did start the recording because it takes a few seconds for it to go.
Okay, and I think I will share my screen and we'll get going. Now I got to make sure I do this correctly this time. Cool. Okay. Welcome everybody to our District 5960 Global Grants Workshop. We started these last year to really focus on global grants. I think most of you probably attended our grants management seminar, which in a lot of districts, the grants management seminar is about 6 or 8 hours long because they try to cover everything related to both district and global grants in one workshop. And we figure for the sake of everybody's attention spans, bladders, stomachs, and just everything that we don't want to do it that way. So we kind of divide them up where the global grants or the grants management seminar is more attuned to the general specifics of grants and district grants. And then we develop this workshop to help you have a better feel for global grants and what needs to be done throughout that process to make your grant the best it can be and make it as easy as possible on yourself. For introduction's sake, my name is Kyle Haugen. I'm with the Prior Lake Rotary Club and I'm our District Rotary Foundation team leader. And Margie, you want to introduce yourself?
I'd love to. I'm Margie Horning. I'm the District Grants team leader and I'm from the Stillwater Sunrise Rotary Club.
Thanks, Margie. And we also have Kathy Hewitt here with us, our district administrator, who is handling a lot of the technical things behind the scenes. So a few housekeeping items before we begin. Please keep yourself muted at all times, just as we kind of talked about before we started. It is somewhat distracting if somebody's not muted. We will unmute everybody at the end for any questions. But along the way, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll either answer them as we go or answer them at the most appropriate time for those questions. Poll questions, we'll make sure we have a couple questions that we'll have as a way to put this in the chat box as well. So that's what we have there. The purpose of this Global Grants Workshop, there are several of them. Number one, we want to share the requirements on global grants so that you can put together not only an acceptable grant, but the best possible grant. And we want to make the process as easy as possible for you. So we'll go through some of the global grant process to broaden your knowledge base as well. And lastly, the Rotary Foundation requires a club be qualified to sponsor a grant. So your participation today will help qualify your club to sponsor a grant in the 2021 year for global grants. Now, that's only for 2021, not years after that. So you would have to attend again for grants in future years. Our agenda for the day, there's a lot there. I'll just let you read through it. But really what we'll do is we're going to talk about the key points for global grants. Certainly, we're not going to cover every detail because you don't want to be here that long and you'd forget half of it anyway. But we want to cover the key points. But the biggest emphasis is you are not alone in the process of doing a global grant. You have the grants team, you have your individual mentor, and a lot of different resources that we'll talk about later on as well. So we're going to try to hit the high points here of things you need to make sure you're aware of to have success with your grant, but not go into every detail. That's what asking questions along the way is for. As we go on here, we'll do our first attendance check just to make sure everybody's here that's supposed to be here. So if you could enter your name and club into the chat box, that would be great. Okay, I think we've given people enough time to do that, so we'll go on. And please continue to enter your name and club if you haven't yet. But talking about during the grants management seminars, we talked about the global or the qualification requirements for being qualified as a club to do grants. We have a little bit different qualifications for a global grant here in our district. We have determined, because we split up the grants management seminar and the global grants workshop, we've said that clubs have to have a member attend both of those for a club to be qualified for a global grant. Certainly, if you're just doing a district grant, it was just the grants management seminar. The club must be in good standing, which, as we described in the grants management seminar, means that you have no grant reports that are outstanding in the Rotary Foundation's eyes or the district's eyes. So any other grants your clubs have done, make sure the reporting up to date, and the club's dues to both Rotary International and our district must be up to date too. And then for either global or district grants, the Rotary Foundation's memorandum of understanding and the district addendum must be signed. So what I am going to do is, before we get into the meat of our discussion, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second because Kathy and Margie have told me it looks fuzzy and I'm going to do some different stuff. But while I do that, I'm going to welcome our next year's district governor, Ed Merrick, to make a couple comments. Ed.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, take care of that fuzzy stuff, would you? And thank you, everyone, for being here on this beautiful, beautiful afternoon. You've already attended the grant management seminar where you learn the basics of applying for a grant, specifically a district grant. Good on you and your club for stepping up to the global grant. Today, you're going to learn how to make a bigger, bolder impact on the world. Global grants require more work to ensure the intent is on one of the 6 areas of focus. Margie Horning and her mentors that comprise the district's grant management team will provide the scrutiny and guidance to secure an approved global grant application. I look forward to following your projects as they spread positive peace across the globe. Thanks again for attending this afternoon. Be proud of the good work you're going to be able to accomplish, and we'll throw it back to Kyle. Take it away.
Thanks, Ed, and let me share my screen again here. We switched monitors, so hopefully that works a little bit better. Man, I don't know if I did this right. Okay, give me just a second because there's a, okay, we're good. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. You would think by this point we would have this down, but such is life. During the grants management seminars, we talked about how all of Rotary's areas of focus lead towards positive peace, which is the fulfillment of all needs in a society. We'll dive into the areas of focus and how they pertain to global grants a little later on, but we wanted to show a video first. So let's hope this works. After viewing that video, we'll just ignore what's on the screen right now. After viewing that video, I think you'll agree that as Rotarians, we have enormous opportunities to make a difference in the lives of people around the globe. Global grants are tools that help us create positive peace. But as you can imagine, the Rotary Foundation provides us with a list of requirements for global grants. These are also identified in the Rotary Foundation's Guide to Global Grants that we sent earlier, but we want to highlight them now. Margie, go for it.
All right, I will. I love that video. It makes me proud to be a Rotarian. But to do a global grant, there's a number of things that you must do. And number one, your project must have a long-term sustainable impact. It must include activities that align with the goals of one of Rotary's areas of focus. Have a minimum budget of $35,000, which includes a minimum World Fund match of $15,000. And this is an important one. You must address an important need identified by the community itself. And the project also must strengthen the community's capacity to meet its own needs. But now you must do a number of things as well. Actively involve the benefiting community in the project. Partner with a club in another country. Qualify your club for global grants every year, which you're doing right now. Develop a project plan that includes a budget and financial management plan. Measure progress towards the outcome. Stay up to date in reporting for all active grants. And another very important point is for humanitarian grants, you must conduct a community assessment before applying, and you must include the results in your application. Now, because it is so critical to a global grant, let's discuss planning for sustainability. Now, sustainability can mean many things, but for Rotary, sustainability means providing a long-term solution to community problems that community members themselves can support after the grant funding ends. We want global grants to make a lasting difference and provide meaningful change in people's lives. Start early. You can't suddenly add sustainability items at the end of the project. Good grant management engages members, supports meaningful service projects, and has meaningful impact long after the grant is done. Global grants really show communities what we can do. Now let's dive a little deeper into how to make a sustainable impact using this graphic from the Rotary Foundation. The first step is starting with the community. Because local participation is so important to a project's success, Rotary requires local sponsors to conduct a community assessment. So it's not us sitting in Minnesota deciding what needs to be done in Uganda, for instance. Assessing your community's strengths, weaknesses, needs, and assets is an essential first step in planning an effective project. By taking the time to learn about your community, you can discover the best opportunities for service and maximize your club's ability to make an impact. The process of doing the assessment helps you build valuable relationships and encourages community members to participate in making and, more importantly, maintaining those improvements. An assessment not only helps you better understand the dynamics of your community, but it also allows you and your project's beneficiaries to make informed decisions about service priorities. Before you start the assessment, consider what specifically you want to learn about your community. You may find a new way to address a known issue or give residents a chance to point out overlooked challenges. While conducting an assessment, also be sure to manage expectations. Communities should understand the benefits of partnering with Rotary. and how that partnership requires their involvement, it requires their contribution, and their ownership. Conduct your community assessment before, and that means before determining the project's goals and scope. The assessment, in other words, should drive the project. Be open-minded. Choose your participants very carefully. Include often overlooked or marginalized groups in the community. Consider yourself an outsider. Don't promise a project before you make a decision. The Global Grants Community Assessment Results Form would be completed and included in your grant application. There's another document called Community Assessment Tools that's a great resource for Rotary projects, and we'll be sending you a copy in an email after the program. Now, after you've started with the community, I believe the next key would be to encourage local ownership. A true sign of a project's success is when community members embrace the project as their very own. Empowering community members to assess their needs and plan projects that address them leads to the most effective projects and the most sustainable outcomes. The process also helps to identify key community members who can help pioneer lasting improvements. These are called the local champions. Another key to sustainability is to provide training. A project's success depends on people. By providing training, education, and community outreach, you strengthen beneficiaries' ability to meet their project objectives. Collaborate with the local organizations to provide this training. Training plans are a requirement for global grants. When preparing them, use the format provided by Rotary. Don't go rogue. They're used to looking at their own form. Well, along with providing training, buying local is significant for the ongoing life of a project. Purchase equipment and technology from local sources whenever possible. Another thing is to make sure spare parts are available locally. Build capacity so that community members can operate, maintain, and repair equipment on their own. Finding local funding can also go a long way to the success of a project. Getting funding from local governments, hospitals, companies, and other organizations integrates your project into the local community and supports your project's long-term success. Oh, finally, measuring. Measuring your success is a key to the project. First, gather the data before you begin your project to determine where you are starting from. Include clear, measurable outcomes in your project plan. Decide how you will collect the data throughout your project and afterward. Maintaining a strong relationship with the community will really help you collect the data and also address any issues that data may bring to light. All of these practices are key to a successful project, and they are all required by the Rotary Foundation in the global grant process. In your application, you'll explain how your project will include each and every one of them. There's another document, the terms and conditions for Rotary Foundation district grants and global grants. It's really an excellent resource for more detailed information on all aspects of grants. We have included a copy that will come out in your email packet.
In the grants management seminar and earlier, we mentioned Rotary's areas of focus and how we make an impact in each of those areas. Global grants support sustainable activities that are aligned with Rotary International's areas of focus and will produce results that address community needs. These 6 areas encompass some of the world's most critical humanitarian issues. 1 is promoting peace. We train adults and young leaders to prevent and mediate conflict and foster understanding within and across cultures. Fighting disease. We educate and equip communities to stop the spread of life-threatening diseases and improve and expand access to low-cost and free healthcare in developing areas. supporting education. We strengthen the capacity of communities to support basic education and literacy, reduce gender disparity, and increase adult literacy. Providing clean water. We support local solutions to bring clean water, sanitation, and hygiene to more people every day. Saving mothers and children. We expand access to quality health care so mothers and their children can live and grow stronger. And growing local economies. We carry out projects that enhance economic and community development and create opportunities for productive work for young and old. So how do these 6 areas of focus come into play with global grants? Your project must comply with an area of focus. Don't be an overachiever. Choose the one area of focus where you can have the most impact and pick that one. This should be an outcome of your needs assessment. The Rotary Foundation strives to process grants efficiently and ensure the quality of a grant-funded project. Getting acquainted with the areas of focus policy statements will help you plan your project. Understanding your area of focus will help your grant get approved. The policy statements help you figure out if your activities are eligible. Ask yourself this: will the activity help achieve the goal of a grant? One example of an activity we thought would fit nicely into several areas of focus was building eco stoves or indoor stovetop projects. By reading the areas of focus policy statements, it was found that eco stoves are not eligible for global grants. So, don't have an answer, you might want to check. My advice is to review what is eligible and ineligible for each area before jumping in and into planning your project. Rotary International has provided us guidelines for each area of focus. All global grant activities are required to align with the goals of an area of focus, and these guidelines state the specific goals for each area. These activities should have a direct impact in the area selected. So don't focus only on the outcomes, but concentrate on the main activities. Look for capacity building, training, and educational opportunities that will help make your project sustainable. All grant requests must comply with the policy statement related to the intended area of focus. More importantly, the Rotary International staff looks to see if your grant fits into one of the areas by using these policy statements. So, becoming familiar with them is critical during all phases of your grant journey. And we'll include a copy of these areas of focus policy statements in the follow-up email. Global grants aren't designed to be done alone, and partnerships are not only important, but required. After all, isn't one of our core values building goodwill and better friendships? To apply for a global grant, two or more Rotary clubs must work together. The host sponsor is the partner in or near the community that's implementing the project. The international sponsor, which most of the time is us, works with the host sponsor but is located outside the host sponsor's country. That host sponsor in country initiates the project, conducts the community assessment, manages the project implementation and budget, and receives the project's funds. The international sponsor's job is to provide financial assistance, technical support, and other guidance from afar, and perform projects that can be done remotely, or tasks that can be done remotely, as well as participate in service during visits to the site. Both sponsors must be qualified to participate in a Rotary Global Grant, as well as both districts have to be qualified as well. They should both work together to develop the project plan so that both sides have a say and are committed to that plan. Also, they should have project committees that collaborate with each other. So it's not just 1 or 2 people, but there's committees on both sides working together. Partnering with cooperating organizations, an NGO, community group, or governmental entity as needed. And they should work together to submit project reports in the Grant Center. Now, if you're working with a cooperating organization, both clubs and the organization must complete a cooperating organization memorandum of understanding. Although other organizations and volunteers may play a large role in the grant, the project sponsors are ultimately responsible for the outcome of the project. So make sure to choose your partners wisely. Margie, you're muted. There you
Well,
go.
I guess it helps if you unmute. All right, now let's talk about planning your project and all the things that go into planning a global grant, which believe me is quite a bit. This plan should be developed by both sponsoring clubs collaborating together. You would create a timeline of all the tasks that need to be completed. You'd work as a team. The host and international sponsors each have a project committee of at least 3 Rotary members working together to make sure that you are meeting all the goals and following your budget. Plan for continuity. You never know when somebody may get ill or drop out of the program. Identify roles. Be real clear on deciding who will do what. Avoid conflicts of interest. Even the appearance of a conflict of interest can interfere with the success of a project. Get expert advice. Say you've got a qualified club member who is a civil engineer. You could contact him or her for a water project. Use your cooperating organizations. They often have technical expertise and resources that can help you with the project. There are Rotary action groups, the RAGs, cadre, and there's also a cadre of technical advisors at RI. Identify measurable outcomes. When you measure your success, you can show that you made a difference. Because RI wants to measure the good we do in the world, they have built it into our global grant requirements. And as you continue to plan your project, you're going to want to create a financial plan, develop a budget, and more importantly, raise those funds. So get a good story going so you get your story out there and clubs and districts are wanting to participate in your well-maintained project. An important tip. Use the global grant application template. The template will walk you through all the information that you need to supply to Rotary. It gives you a chance to prepare your responses before entering into the online application. It alerts you to areas that you may need to flesh out a little bit more. Work on answering all the questions as clearly and concisely as humanly possible. Now you're really on a roll. Once you plan your project and it's approved, it's time to implement the project. It's crucial that you implement the project according to your project plan. As you carry out your project, keep reviewing your project plan with your project committee and the team. Communication is the key to having a smoother implementation of the project, so we can't emphasize communication enough. Global grant sponsors for humanitarian projects and vocational training teams, which are sometimes included in a global grant, all of these must incorporate what we call monitoring and evaluation measures. And it would all be within the area focus section of the online grant application. Now, let's move on to monitoring. Again, monitoring can mean many things. But for Rotary, it's the continual process of collecting specific data, and it uses the measures and benchmarks you outlined in your grant application to track the progress of your grant. Now, evaluation is the assessment of how well your project is achieving those objectives. Now, there's many steps for monitoring and evaluating your plan. The first one would probably be establish clear project goals. Identify applicable project-specific measures. Add only measures that clearly, and I do mean clearly, link to specific goals. Establish baseline data and the methods that you'll use to collect that data. And then you would submit all of that as part of your online application. So collecting data during the project, and you would collect the data as you continue on with the project and monitor its progress. And this is where your host partner, the cooperating organization, or key community people can really lend a hand to get that data collected and to ward off any issues that might show up when the data is collected. Then you would evaluate the data and submit the results when you complete your report to the Rotary Foundation. There's an item to review, and it's called the Document for Global Grant Monitoring and Evaluation Plan Supplement. I know that's a long name, but the document has a lot of great information in it, and we'll be emailing you a copy. The document has a list of measures for each area of focus. You'll also find a glossary of Rotary Foundation standard measures that explain exactly what each word and measure means. So for instance, if you're using adult as a measure, you have to know that Rotary says an adult is an individual over age 18. Now you may think it's another age, but as far as Rotary and that measurement goes, it's an individual over age 18. Think of monitoring and evaluation as a circle. First we monitor and evaluate. Then what do? We take that data and we resolve any issues that might come up. Then what do? Because we're lifetime learners, we learn from what's happened, from the good, the bad, and the mediocre. And then we share that information with all involved, our cooperating organization, our community members, and our host partner. Now, another thing that's very important is financial transparency. Actually, financial transparency is one of the keys to the project. The financial management plan you develop during the project planning helps you keep track of grant funds, promotes transparency to all involved, and safeguards against its misuse. It also facilitates reporting. Now, when you get approved, you're going to be getting some funding. So you open a bank account that is used solely for receiving and dispersing the grant funds. Grants are not intended to produce interest income for the clubs, so keep grants in a low interest or a non-interest bearing account. Now, there's some other things, as you can imagine, that are quite important that you will need to remember. You have to follow local laws. When you are talking about the transfer and the disbursement of the funds, after your grant, once your grant is approved, RI will send you a notice saying this is exactly what you need to do to get the funds transferred to that low interest or non-interest bearing account. So after your grant application is approved, your club must complete the payment requirements outlined in the approval notification, and they give you blow-by-blow directions on how to do that. Once that's approved, your funds will go into that account. Now, keeping financial records, very, very important, and retaining documents. It is recommended that all grant correspondence, including emails, be kept. Beneficiary documentation, including the community assessment and the cooperating MOU. Any vendor documentation, quotes, or contracts, keep those as well. Grant-related documentation, including receipts, invoices, bank statements, inventory, and photos. Yes, you're going to want to take a lot of photos. You will need them, especially as you complete your reports that need to be completed and sent to the Rotary Foundation. Now, as far as reporting requirements go, a project report, once it's been approved and your funds are transferred to your bank account, that project report is due within 12 months of receiving the payment and every 12 months thereafter. It's recommended that you start a little bit before that you're bumping up to the deadline, because you do have to get signatures, and sometimes that can be an issue in other countries with their internet service. Reports will ask for information on all aspects of your project as well as its outcome. Rotary asks for grant reports to ensure good stewardship. but also so that we can show others how we can change communities for the better. And unlike district grants, global grants are submitted to Rotary International, not the district. Kyle, on to you.
Thanks, Margie. Beginning in the 2020-21 Rotary year, we're instituting some new global grant approval and progress guidelines here in our district. Over the past several years, we're seeing a few things happening when it came to global grants. First, grants weren't moving very quickly. So our DDF, our district designated funds, were not being put to best use. In a few cases, we had committed DDF to grants that not only took a long time, but ultimately fell through. So our DDF was reserved for no reason. Second, we haven't had any guidelines with regards to when clubs could apply for global grant DDF. So it had become first come, first serve. Obviously, that's not a fair to all concerned way of going about things. So the global grants team came up with a set of guidelines to alleviate these issues. The goal here was to establish clear timelines and expectations for global grants to ensure fair allocation and prompt use of Rotary Foundation funds. After all, we want this money to be used as quickly as possible so it can make the most difference possible. The applicability of these guidelines, it's anytime a global grant for which a club in our district has been requested to contribute $2,500 or more. So that means that if you are the sponsor of a grant, you need to be aware of these guidelines. Or if you're partnering on another grant, which is coming from outside of 5960, and you're contributing more than $2,500, it applies there as well. We now have a uniform application deadline. All global grant proposals must be submitted or are due by August 1st. All proposals will be presented for review at the September grants meeting. This is a similar process to what we use for district grants, but where we ask for district grants to be submitted by the proposals by June 1st and then reviewed at the June meeting for the coming year, Rotary year, you have a few more months. So the process is due by August 1st and then the presentations in September. With the proposals due on August 1st, we also wanted to make sure that the proper amount of work has been put into the grants to ensure that they are in good shape, both in scope and the intent of the club. Here is the information required for the proposal. You'll notice the August 1st deadline. This is to give the grants team sufficient time to review the proposals and work with your club contacts to make sure they're in good order. So the proposal is due August 1st. The presentation isn't until mid-September, and that's to ensure that everything's in order. So the information that we need, number one, the host club and contacts that's in the country where the work will be done are identified, and at least 2 contacts in that club listed. Again, if there's only 1 listed and that person stops being a Rotarian, or in some cases it's the president of the club, and when they're no longer president, they're not in quote power, and then what happens? With having at least 2 contacts listed, we make sure there's continuity. We need to make sure that host club and host district are qualified by the Rotary Foundation, and the grants team can help you with that. A completed needs assessment has to be done. A needs assessment, as Margie talked about, is so critical to a grant that there's really no reason to allow a grant to even move forward into the application stage if that needs assessment isn't done, because as we've seen in the past, if it's not done up front, the Rotary Foundation isn't going to approve the grant. Next, beneficiaries of the project need to be identified. Who's going to benefit from the project? That needs to be identified as part of the proposal. The area of focus has to be identified so you know which of the 6 it's fitting into. The explanation of grant sustainability. Again, going back to the sustainability, how will this project continue to benefit people after the project is done? The training plan, if necessary, needs to be completed, so it's identified how people are going to be trained on using whatever the grant is for. A preliminary budget has to be put together, a preliminary financing page, including the amount of funds being requested, and a fund dispersal plan. Why are those important? Because obviously, if we're trying to dedicate DDF to different places, we need to know that the plan has been solidly put together. Along with establishing the uniform submission date, we have also put together a progress reporting timeline to ensure a grant is moving along. Without guidelines, the process tends to slow down unnecessarily. So these guidelines should help create a sense of urgency to get towards completion. The first progress reporting guideline. Now, I want to step back for a second, and Fred asked a question. There are two different types of reports here, okay? Once the grant is approved by the Rotary Foundation, your first Rotary Foundation progress report is due 12 months after you receive the funds. And then every 12 months after that until you have submitted a final report. So there's two types of reports there. Progress reports, well, the project is still ongoing, and then your final report, which says we're done. So that part of things is what's required by the Rotary Foundation, and that's on an annual basis after payment. During the project application development phase, we have these district progress reporting marks. So you sent your proposal in by August 1st. We reviewed all the proposals in September and then allocated our DDF accordingly. Then by December 1st, that's your first progress reporting deadline. And these do not have to be as significant of reports as what the Rotary Foundation requires. Basically, we need to know that your application has been entered into the Rotary Foundation grants portal and is in draft status. And what that means is that a global grant ID number has been issued by the Rotary Foundation. And at least 25% of the club funding has been committed. Now, if you are committed, remember, we went back, a global grant has to have a minimum of $10,000 of club funds from our district, or club funds in the way we look at things. If your club wants to do all $10,000, you've met this requirement. But if you are only putting in 1,000, you need to make sure you have other clubs committed at least 25% of the total. Then 3 months later, March 1st, the application should be in authorizations needed status, meaning that you have put together the application. It's done and is now waiting on authorizations from your club contacts, the host club contacts, any other, and then any other clubs that are involved, and the districts that are providing the DDF. And you need to have commitments for 100% of funding at that point, which you certainly, to get to authorizations needed status, you need to have those commitments. Then by June 1st, which is essentially 10 months later, you need to have Rotary Foundation approval, okay? The work doesn't have to be done. It's just that the Rotary Foundation has approved the project at that point. What does that mean? You have 100% of the funds, not committed, but collected, and all Rotary Foundation questions have been successfully answered. And what that means is after you submit your, in that second step, once the grant is authorized by all parties, it is submitted to the Rotary Foundation for review. They'll probably come back with questions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And those have all had to be successfully answered, because only at that point is it approved by the Rotary Foundation. Now, you may think that these deadlines are a little strict, but we want clubs to be conscious of moving the grant forward as quickly as possible. You'll notice by June 1st, the grant needs to be approved by the Rotary Foundation. As I mentioned a second ago, doesn't mean the work has to be completed. It just means that you've had essentially 9 or 10 months to complete the application and get the project approved. By working diligently, this should be accomplished. What we've seen in the past is a lot of times this would be on the back burner for someone. And there might be some questions and they'd take a couple weeks to get back to it. And then they'd have to send an email to someone in another part of the world, and it takes a couple more weeks. And then they'd take a couple weeks to respond. That's the delays that cause so much of the issues. So if we can make sure that we're making this a priority for everyone, we should be able to cut down on a lot of those delays. So what happens if you miss one of these milestones? The consequences, if you fail to meet the June 1st milestone of having your grant approved, it may result in the revocation of your district designated funds, which means that you would have to begin the process back new that year. Failure to provide progress reports along the way may result in revocation as well. With both of these, we understand that there may be extenuating circumstances. We dealt with a project this year in a part of Africa where the district on the ground is traditionally infamous for their slow approval on things. And we worked hard. The club that was the sponsor of the grant made sure to keep Margie and I in the loop. So we were able to work up the levels in Rotary to continue to put pressure on that district there. It took longer than we would have liked it to, but we knew we were going the right direction, and we knew that the club in our area was doing the right things. Certainly, that's going to be a situation where the grants team is going to look at it and say, okay, we understand this is out of your control and are going to provide an extension, but don't count on that. And please make sure you're working as quickly as possible to get things done. As for ongoing reporting, as I mentioned, that's the reporting. Once the grant's approved, that's what's required by the Rotary Foundation, the 12 months after funding and each 12 months after that. So if your club is delinquent on a Rotary Foundation report, your club will not be eligible to sponsor a new grant, either district or global. That is one of the qualifications that we've talked about in our district. Now, if you look at this, because of the timing, that means that you're basically 2 years behind on a report because of when everything is done. So by that point, I would hope it's not an issue. Since all of these grant proposals will be reviewed at the same time, it will make it much smoother for the grants team to allocate the district designated funds to your proposals. So that DDF will be allocated by the grants team. And during the grants management seminar, I mentioned an issue we've had over the past several years on the district grant side, where we've had more requests for funds than what we've had available. So we've had a shortfall. Over the past few years, we've spent down our reserve on the global grant DDF side and may face a similar situation there. If a shortfall, we try to be as fair to all concerned and as possible in allocating our DDF, and the grants team will use a matrix for this calculation. Like on the district grant side of things, there are 4 factors in this matrix. If you have any questions, please reach out to one of us offline, but I'll touch on those right now. They're similar to the district grant side. Number 1 is obviously the per capita giving to the Rotary Foundation's annual fund over the past 3 years. And I'll mention this again the same way as I mentioned it in the grants management seminar. The most recent year of those 3 is weighted more significantly. So if your club hasn't had a history of strong Rotary Foundation giving, you still have a couple months this Rotary year to bump up your standing there to be eligible for a larger chunk of DDF. Number 2, the club participation as a partner in other global grants in the past 3 years. How many other clubs have you contributed to their global grants? We look at that as a positive because, again, we love partnerships. One of the things that we want to do to make sure we reward clubs for coming forward with global grants for the first time is to treat, if you're a club that keeps doing global grants each and every year, it's probably going to be looked at as a little bit of a negative just because we want those new clubs to have better standing there, because oftentimes they're not the ones that are giving a lot to the Rotary Foundation on a regular basis. So those are kind of the three objective criteria, and then the grants team evaluation of projects and how impactful the project will be. So the best way that you can get the most match of DDF, if we have a shortfall, obviously make sure your club members are giving a lot to the Rotary Foundation, partner with other clubs on their global grants, and make sure it's a very beneficial global grant, which certainly global grants tend to be much more uniformly beneficial than maybe district grants are. So we've covered a lot of information in a short amount of time today, but don't worry, you don't have to go through the grant process alone. Mentioned that at the beginning. There are plenty of tools and resources to assist you. As we mentioned throughout this workshop and the grants management seminar, when you first bring an idea forward, you'll be assigned a mentor. Our mentors are part of the grants team, and they'll work alongside you during the whole grant process to make sure your application is put together correctly and that the full grant process goes as smoothly as possible. Second, we have a district international service chair that can help research any special requirements in a country, help identify whether the country or the club or district on the ground, find a club or district that can assist, make sure they're qualified by the Rotary Foundation, and give advice based on other grants that we've maybe done in that country in the past. Right now, Craig Leiser is just finishing his third year of his 3-year term as District International Service Chair, and past District Governor and longtime grants mentor Jim Hunt will be taking over for him July 1st. We also have our district's quick reference guide, which provides a lot of good information about the grant process. You have a copy of this, and I would recommend reviewing it before you get started with the process so you know what to expect. I mentioned your mentor a minute ago, but it's more than just having a mentor. You have an entire team of mentors working together behind the scenes to review your grants and make sure they're put together as well as possible. And you may get help from several mentors along the way. Another key part of the global grants process is Rotary Foundation staff. Since the grant is managed by the Rotary Foundation, this means that staff people will review the grant. Initially, as I mentioned earlier, they will potentially ask for additional info or to clarify certain things. Don't get discouraged by this. They're trying to help make sure the project fits within the Rotary Foundation guidelines and has the most impact possible. Along the way, you'll be able to ask them for guidance regarding the implementation and reporting of the grant as well. Let me stress, they want this grant to be successful, and their work helps to accomplish your goals. So don't look at that as a negative, but they're just trying to make sure that everything is as clear as possible and as effective as possible. After all, we don't get a perfect rating by Charity Navigator without that careful oversight. There are plenty of other online resources out there at our district site and rotary.org that you can utilize as well. And as a reminder, we'll be emailing you several key documents after this workshop. And to answer Carrie's question in the chat, and Kathy did as well, we're recording this workshop and the link will be sent out with that information also. Margie?
All right, good job, Kyle. And if you can't find any of these documents and you're looking online, just email me and I will shoot you a copy, okay? All right, now let's recap some of the principles of a successful grant. And of course, all of our District 5960 grants, we want to be super successful. Let's talk about the needs assessment. The most successful projects work with the community to identify a need and figure out how best to address it, and discover what resources are available within that community. How about an organized implementation plan? Use the results of your community assessment to start your plan. A good plan will make sure that tasks are completed on time and that none are forgotten. A good plan clearly lists who is responsible for each task. And that goes with the next point, frequent partner communication and teamwork. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Create a regular schedule to communicate current grant activity. Say email once a week or something of that nature. And who knows, with the Zoom deal, we maybe can do Zoom with our colleagues in the other country. Sustainable projects will have measurable and lasting outcomes for the community. Start early. You cannot add sustainability at the end of a project. Proper stewardship. All project sponsors are ultimately responsible for the outcome of the project. Keeping good records is key to proper stewardship. Grants results promoted within the club and the community. Don't forget to celebrate milestones along the way. Let everybody know what's been accomplished. You've done great work to make the world a better place, so don't be afraid to toot your horn. All right, Kyle?
As we get towards the end here, if you would quickly, please enter your name and club again in the chat box so we know that you stuck around for the majority of this, this session. I'll give you just a minute there. And as we wrap up, I want to touch on a couple of things. Obviously, the importance of giving to the Rotary Foundation. As we've talked about, these funds that we can use in grants are because of the donations we've made as Rotarians in our district. So the more money that we give, the bigger impact we make. And we need your help in making sure we can maximize that impact by encouraging our club members to give to the Rotary Foundation. So don't just simply focus on the outcomes of the grant, but make sure you're encouraging your club members to help support other grants by giving to the foundation. Certainly we need to get qualified, which you've done through this process, and the other takeaways like Margie just talked about. The biggest ones obviously being the needs assessment, making sure of that strong plan and communication, having a sustainable project that fits one of the areas of focus, and the reporting on the back end, which leads to good stewardship. And along the way, you're not alone. We'll stress that over and over again. Margie, her grants team, me, and the Rotary Foundation are all here to help so that you can be as successful as possible. Margie, any other takeaways from your end?
Yeah, I'd like to say it's often easy to get discouraged. You think, oh no, another group of questions. But remember, these are important things to make your grant the best thing possible. And we are making a difference and we're changing lives, and we want to do a good job of that. Now, another thing that I believe is that don't get scared on these global grants. They are going to become more important than ever. With this global pandemic, I believe that the needs in communities across the globe are going to be needing our global grant ideas more and more and more. I mean, more than we can possibly imagine right now. So take the plunge, jump in, and try to get a global grant together, because you know that in the end, even though you tear your hair out, that you're probably going to be making a huge difference in the lives of people that you may never meet. So thanks for paying attention and attending.
I do it once a presentation,
Linda,
Margie.
yeah,
One
Linda
time per
had a-
presentation. There it was. All right, we have our questions screen up here, so we'll open it up for questions. And I'm going to skip this question slide. Just know we're in that part and put our contact information up there, just so you have that. The first question that we have is from Linda Robertson back a little bit ago that had to deal with, does the Rotary Foundation consider expanding the areas of focus to include environmental impact that might accept smoke-free cooking stoves? I'll touch on the broader part of that, and then Margie, maybe you can just at least talk about why those cooking stoves weren't acceptable when we get that. Linda and everybody, I can tell you that right now the Rotary Foundation is actually in discussions about how to consider environmental impact as one of the as an area of focus or an eligible thing on their own. Certainly right now there's some, it can kind of be fit into areas, but they're really discussing, and there's actually a small group of trustees, and I think one of the Rotary Foundation board members that have broken off into a task force to talk about this. And I think it probably would have been established, but everything's kind of been delayed in this pandemic time. But they are trying to figure out the best way to include environmental impact in a way that is not political, not seen as climate change, global warming, anything like that, but the environmental impact, as you said, and they're weighing whether or not environmental impact should be more present in each of the current 6 areas of focus, or should be a 7th area of focus on its own. So I anticipate at some time in the next coming months, we hear more announcements about that. I believe the trustees meet again in June. And I think there will be more report on that at that point in time. Not sure if they'll make a decision then, but I know it's something that they are discussing. Margie, do you want to touch on the exact reason those stoves weren't allowable? And if anybody else in the meantime has any other questions to put in the chat box, go for it.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Oh.
I know that when Ian was here in November, Ian Risley, we asked him specifically that question, and he was going to get back to us, and I never heard the answer. So I don't have an answer as to why, but as for right now, Linda, they aren't acceptable in any of the 6 areas of focus. But just when you do get that document that will be emailed on the areas of focus, you'll go through and you'll see a little green leaf on several of the areas, and that will be, they'll be talking about environmental impact within each area of focus. So they are building it into them, but like Kyle said, we don't know if it's going to continue to expand within each particular area, or if it will be pulled out and be a specific 7th area of focus. So sorry. Do you know the answer, Kyle? I never heard back from Ian.
No, you were the one that put it in the script, so I was hoping you did.
Oh. Darn.
Any other questions that anybody has today? Any other questions? Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for attending this Global Grants Workshop. We hope that you took away information that will help you in the grant process, and that you're looking forward to creating positive peace in the world with your grant. A homework item, the same on the Grants Management Seminar, but please make sure to complete the Rotary Foundation Memorandum of Understanding and our district's addendum that you were sent, and we'll send again as part of the packet you get tomorrow. This will just make sure that your club is qualified for a 2020-21 grant. And the more that we can ask you to proactively send those back, it means the less Kathy has to chase people down as we get closer to the first of the year. So with that, if nobody has any other questions, Margie, any other pearls of wisdom to add?
Nope. If you have questions, call, email. If I don't know the answer, I will certainly try to get it to the best of my ability. So, take the plunge, everyone.
Absolutely. All right, then thank you. Have a good rest of the evening. Have a good weekend. And to all the moms out